Let's now jump in time. The Hebrews, back again in the land they had originally settled, were now better organized. They established a civilization notable for great royal legislators such as Solomon and David, to name but two. The Auba observed that these people, following Solomon's death, were heading towards anarchy and allowing themselves to be influenced by evil priests. Alexander the Great invaded Egypt, but, in the end, did nothing constructive for the world. The Romans succeeded him, building an immense empire that was oriented more towards materialism than spirituality. The great peoples, such as the Romans, were technologically advanced for their time, relatively speaking, of course, but they brought with them a smattering of gods and beliefs, just enough to cause spiritual confusion, and, certainly, not enough to lead the people to universal truth. This time, the Auba decided to give a big hand. Rather than give it in a spiritually sterile land like Rome, the Auba did it in Israel, thinking that the Hebrews were very intelligent, having ancestors who were spiritually highly advanced. The Auba considered them adequate to propagate universal truth. The Hebrew people were unanimously elected by the Great Thauri on Theauba. The Great Thauri on Theauba are 7 masters who govern the planet Theauba. On Earth, the Hebrew people were referred to as the Chosen People, and the name could not be more appropriate. They were indeed chosen. Theauba's plan was to capture public imagination by sending a messenger of peace. The story of the birth of Jesus, as you know it, with the Virgin Mary as mother, is quite true. The appearance of an angel at the Annunciation is correct in every detail. Theauba sent a spaceship, and one of the Theauba people appeared before the Virgin, who was indeed a virgin, telling her she was going to become pregnant. The embryo was implanted in her while she was under hypnosis. I guess you are having enormous difficulty believing what I have been saying. Never forget that Theauba have the knowledge. You have not seen what Theauba can do. Attend carefully, and I will give you a few examples to help you understand what I am going to tell you. The following describes a scene that truly took place on the planet Theauba, a story between the book's author, Michel, and his Theauban mentor, Thao.
Thou stopped talking and appeared to be concentrating. As I watched, her face became a blur, and instinctively I rubbed my eyes. Of course, this did not help, and, in fact, she became progressively transparent until I could see right through her. Finally, she was no longer there. She had completely disappeared. "Thou," I called, slightly concerned. "Where are you?"
"Here, Michelle."
I jumped, for the voice came as a whisper quite close to my ear. "But you are completely invisible."
"Now, yes, but you are going to see me again. Look."
My goodness, what has happened to you? Several feet in front of me, I saw the silhouette of Thao, completely golden yet radiant, as though inside her there burned a fire, its flames brief but intense. As for her face, it was recognizable, but her eyes seemed to send forth little rays each time she spoke. She began to rise a few feet above the ground without having moved a muscle of her body. Then she started to circle the room so fast I had trouble keeping my eyes on her. She stopped eventually above her seat and sat her ghostly form down. It was as though she were made of a shining mist. She was still recognizable as Thao, and yet quite transparent. The next instant, she was gone. I looked around, but she had completely vanished.
"Look no further, Michelle. I am back."
Indeed, there she was, in flesh and bone again, sitting on her seat. "How do you do that?"
As I was just explaining to you, we have the knowledge. We can revive the dead, cure the deaf and the blind, make people walk who are paralyzed. We can cure any malady you care to name. We are masters, not of nature, but in nature. And we can do the thing most difficult of all. We can generate life spontaneously. Out of the release of cosmic ray, we can create any type of living creature, including man.
You mean that you have mastered the test tube baby?
Not at all, Michelle. You reason like an earthling. We can create a human body, but that is done only by the great Thauri, taking infinite care, for the human body must be inhabited by several bodies, as you are aware, the physiological, the astral, etc. If not, it would merely be a robot. Perfect knowledge is therefore required for such an undertaking.
So, how much time do you need to create a baby?
You have not quite grasped what I am saying, Michelle. I am speaking not of a baby, but in this case, of an adult human being. A man of 20 or 30 years of age can be created by the Thauri in approximately 24 of your Earth hours.
As one might expect, I was completely stunned by this disclosure. I had traveled in a spaceship at a speed several times that of light and had found myself billions of kilometers from my home. I had met extraterrestrials, traveled in astral body, journeyed in time to witness scenes that occurred thousands of years ago. I could now see auras and understand languages I'd never heard before. I had even visited briefly Earth's parallel universe. I thought I knew what there was to be known by an Earthling of these people and their capabilities, thanks to the explanations given to me. Now, it seemed I was being told that what I'd been presented with was like an hors d'oeuvre. My hosts could create a living human being in 24 hours. Thou was watching me, reading me like an open book.
Now that you follow my meaning, I'll finish the story which is going to interest so many of Earthlings, insofar as the Bible has distorted it a little. So, Angel from Thiauba implanted an embryo so that Mary, a virgin, found herself pregnant. By acting in this way, Thiauba hoped to attract the attention of the people and emphasize that the coming of Jesus was really a remarkable event. On the birth of the child, Thiauba appeared before the shepherds in the same way that I demonstrated a few moments ago. Thiauba didn't send the three famous wise men. They are part of the legend that has been grafted on to real events. However, Thiauba did guide the shepherds and a group of the people towards the spot where Jesus was born. This was accomplished by sending forth one of Thiauba's spheres and rendering it luminous. The optical effect thereby created made it indeed resemble a star over Bethlehem. Nowadays, if Thiauba were to do such a thing, people would be crying UFO. Eventually the priests, and those who the priests named prophets, learned of the birth. In view of the phenomena of the star and the angels, the prophets announced to the people the birth of the Messiah, referring to him as the King of the Jews. King Herod, however, had spies in all quarters, as most leaders do. When they reported these remarkable events to him, he found it all difficult to understand and became frightened. In those times, the lives of the people were worth little to their leaders, and Herod had no qualms about ordering the deaths of 2,606 babies in the region. While these deaths were being carried out, Thiauba evacuated, under hypnosis, Mary, Joseph, and the baby Jesus, as well as 2 donkeys, in Thiauba's spaceship, depositing them in a spot quite close to Egypt. Do you see how the facts have been distorted? Now, there are other details which were reported conscientiously, but they are inaccurate due to lack of information. Let me explain. The baby Jesus, born in Bethlehem, proved, by the miracles pertaining to his birth, that he was quite special and was, in fact, the Messiah. So, Thiauba had captured the imagination of the people, but when a baby is born, its astral body cannot know all in regards to its previous knowledge. This was the case of Moses, too, and yet he was a great person. Thiauba required a messenger who would be able to persuade humanity that there was another life beyond this one, through reincarnation of the astral body, etc. This was no longer commonly accepted since civilization on Earth had become more and more degraded following the disappearance of Atlantis. You know that when you want to explain something that is not a material fact, even to your closest friends, you are confronted by skepticism. People seek material proof, and if they don't see it with their own eyes, they won't believe. In order to transmit Thiauba's message, Thiauba needed someone who behaved like an extraordinary being, like someone coming from the heavens, who performed what would appear to be miracles. Such a person would be believed, and his teachings would be listened to. As you know, an astral body being reincarnated as a baby passes through the river of oblivion, and his earlier material knowledge is effaced. Therefore, the child born in Bethlehem would not have been able to perform miracles, even if he lived to 100 years of age. However, he was a superior being, like Moses. This is proven by the way he astonished temple doctors at the age of 12. Like the very young people now on earth, who are called geniuses because they seem to have a calculation in their heads, Jesus was a human being inhabited by a highly evolved astral body. And yet, even if he had studied in the very advanced schools on earth, amongst the Nagas, for example, he never could have acquired the knowledge to revive the dead or cure the sick. I know that, on earth, there are people who believe that, from the age of 12 until his return to Judea, Jesus studied in the monasteries of India and Tibet. This is how they try to explain the gap that exists in the Bible, when Jesus simply disappeared from Bethlehem. He left his parents' home at the age of 14, accompanied by his 12-year-old brother, Oriki. He traveled to Burma, India, China, and Japan. His brother accompanied Jesus everywhere, until Oriki was accidentally killed in China. Jesus took a lock of Oriki's hair with him, for he loved him very much. Jesus was 50 years of age when he arrived in Japan, where he married and had 3 daughters. Finally, he died in the Japanese village of Shingo, where he had lived for 45 years. He was buried in Shingo, which is on the main island of Japan, Honshu, and beside his tomb is another, containing the little box holding Oriki's lock of hair. Those of our fellow people who like evidence can go to Shingo, formerly known as Hirai, in the district of Aomori. But let's go back to Thiauba's precise mission in this regard. The only messenger Thiauba could send to earth had to be one of the Thiauban. The Christ, who died on the cross in Jerusalem, was called Arioch. He was brought by Thiauba people to the desert of Judea, having volunteered to change his physical body. Thus, he abandoned his hermaphrodite body that all Thiauban use, which had lived some considerable time on Thiauba, and took on the body of Christ, created for him by the Thauri of Thiauba. By so doing, he maintained totally the knowledge he possessed on Thiauba. But why couldn't he have remained in his body and simply reduced it in size, as Thiauba people are capable of this skill? Couldn't he have stayed long enough in a shrunken body? There was another problem. He had to resemble a human being from Earth in all respects. And since Thiauba people are hermaphrodites, Thiauba couldn't risk the Hebrews noticing that this messenger from God was half female. Thiauba people can regenerate a body at will. Thiauba people can also create a body, as I have just explained, and they can reduce it in size. I think that it is difficult for you to assimilate all this and to believe what I tell you. But Thiauba have already revealed enough for you to know that they are capable of mastering most natural phenomena. Jesus, who came from Thiauba, was taken by Thiauba people into the desert, and you know what followed. He knew that he would come up against numerous difficulties, and that he was going to be crucified. He knew all, for he had previewed his life with other Thiauba people, but he had done so as an astral body in a physical body. The visions, I repeat, seen by astral bodies in physical bodies are not erased in the way that visions seen by astral bodies with the higher selves are. Thus, he knew all and knew exactly what to do. Of course, he had the power to resuscitate the dead, cure the blind and the deaf, and, when he was crucified and dead, some other Thiauba people were there to take him away and revive him. They rolled the stone from the tomb, quickly took him to their spacecraft, which was positioned nearby, and, there, revived him. At the right moment, he appeared again, thereby providing his immortality, showing that there was, indeed, life after death, and regenerating hope among the people by persuading them that they did belong to the Creator, and that each of us possesses a spark of his divinity. Some people may ask, so, all his miracles were performed in order to prove that what he preached was true? Yes, because the Hebrews and the Romans would never have believed him if he hadn't proven himself. There was a very good example of the strength of skepticism among people on earth regarding the Shroud of Turin. Although millions believe in the coming of Jesus and practice more or less Christian religions, they were anxious to hear the results of research by experts into whether or not the shroud covered Christ after his death. You now know the answer to this. However, people seek proof, and more proof, and still more proof, for doubt still exists in their minds. Buddha, an earthling, who acquired his understanding through his own study, did not say, as our fellow people do, "I believe," but rather, "I know." Faith is never perfect, but knowledge is. The author of this book, Thiauba Prophecy, Michel, know when he return to earth and tell his story, the first thing he will be asked is for evidence. If Thiauba were to give him, for example, a piece of metal which doesn't exist on earth, there would always be one, among the experts who analyze it, who would insist that he prove the metal was not created by a clever alchemist of his acquaintance, or some such thing. Did Thiauba people give Michel something as proof? No, they did not. He have no material proof, for precisely the reasons I have just outlined. There would be no point. Faith is nothing in comparison with knowledge. Buddha knew, and when Michel returned to earth, he too are able to say, "I know." There is a well-known story of doubting Thomas, who wanted to touch Christ's wounds, for seeing them with his own eyes did not convince him enough, and yet, when he touched them, he was still doubtful. He suspected some kind of magic trick. People know nothing of nature on our planet, and, as soon as something occurs, which is a little beyond our understanding, everyone claims it is magic. Levitation is magic. Invisibility is magic. And yet, Thiauba people are only applying natural laws. Rather, you should say, levitation is knowledge, and invisibility is knowledge. So, Christ was sent to earth to preach love and spirituality. He had to contend with people who were not highly evolved, speaking to them in parables. When he tipped over the merchants' tables at the temple, angry for the first and only time, he was making a statement against money. His mission was to impart a message of love and goodness, love one another, and also to enlighten the people in regard to the reincarnation of astral bodies and immortality. This was all distorted by priests in the time that followed, and numerous disagreements led to the rise of the many sects which claim to follow the teachings of Christ. Christians throughout the centuries have even killed in the name of God. The Inquisition was a good example, and the Spanish Catholics in Mexico behaved worse than the most savage tribes, all in the name of God and Christ. Religions are a veritable curse on our planet, as I have said, and as I have proved. As for the new sects that are springing up and flourishing all over the planet, they are based on control by brainwashing. It is terrifying to see young people, healthy in body and spirit, throw themselves at the feet of charlatans claiming to be gurus and great masters, when the latter are masters of only two things: talking and collecting fabulous sums of money. This, of course, gives them power and enormous pride to see themselves dominating entire crowds of people who submit to them, body and soul. Not long ago, there was even one leader who asked his followers to commit suicide, and they obeyed. Since on earth people love proof, there is an excellent one to give people. Universal law forbids suicide. If this master had been genuine, he would have known this. In demanding this sacrifice from them, he presented the greatest proof of his ignorance. Sects and religions are a curse on earth, and when you see that the Pope sets aside millions of francs or dollars for his travel, when he could make do with much less, and use what money is available to help countries suffering from famine, you cannot persuade me that it is the word of Christ which directs such actions. There is a passage in our Bible that says, "It is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter paradise." The Vatican is certainly the wealthiest church on our planet, and yet the priests have made vows of poverty. They have no fear of being damned, yet they believe in damnation, because they say it is the church which is rich, not them. This is really just a play on words, since they make up the church. It's like the son of a multi-billionaire claiming that he is not rich. Only his father is. The church has not distorted the passage in the Bible relating to wealth. They have used it to their advantage. For isn't it preferable that the rich grow poorer at the profit of the church? The young generations on earth are in the process of self-examination. Young people have come to a turning point. Events have led them to it, and I know that they feel alone more than any younger generation has before them. It isn't by joining sects or religious groups that they are going to be free of their solitude. First, if you want to elevate yourself, you must meditate and then concentrate, which is different, although often the two are confused. You do not need to go to a special place, for the greatest and most beautiful temple of human is inside oneself. There, people can enter into communication with their higher self by concentration, asking their higher self to help them surmount his earthly, material difficulties. But certain people need to communicate with other human beings, like themselves, and they can meet together for this purpose. Those of them who are more experienced will be able to give advice, but no one should ever adopt a position as master. The master came 2,000 years ago, or rather, I should say one of the masters, but human on earth crucified him. However, for approximately 300 of our years, the message he brought with him was followed. After that, it was distorted, and now, on earth, we have returned to a point that is worse than that of 2,000 years ago. The young generation of whom I have just spoken are rising up on our planet and realizing, little by little, the truth of many of the things I have been talking about. But they must learn to look inside themselves for their answers. They should not wait for help to come to them from elsewhere, or they will be disappointed.